Yo.
From this distant vantage point, the Earth might not seem of any particular interest.
Yo.
But for us, preserve, cherish the only home we've ever known. The pale blue dot.
Well, Mr. Gabe, welcome to the show. I was about to say welcome back to the show because we've spoken a few times, but welcome to the My Mate podcast.
Thank you. Yeah, you were on my podcast on mental health, and I appreciate your time for that one. That was a good episode.
Yeah, that was good fun. We were talking about OCD and all that sort of thing.
Yeah, OCD, anxiety from a client's perspective, and I think it was really refreshing for my audience. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, sweet man. Well, why did you start your podcast? I guess it's been going for how long now?
It will be it'll be 3 years in September. And I started that. My audience is incoming professionals in the community mental health field. And I don't know how things are in Australia, but the way they are in the United States is fresh out of graduate school.
Yep.
Especially here in Virginia where I live. Really the only jobs you can get are working in community mental health. And not that that's a bad thing, but it's not private practice, like you see it in movies and stuff like that. It's not like that at all.
Yeah.
We're going into people's homes and all that stuff, and we're seeing really sick people, probably people that are more sick than we probably should be allowed to see, actually.
Yeah.
I found that myself and a few of my coworkers were really, really burnt out after a couple of years, and it really, really frustrated me. My wife did community mental health. I did community mental health, and long story short, I started my gym because really the community mental health job was not bringing in any income for me and her. And we were I started my gym probably 3 months before we got married because we had no money, because that's how poorly those community mental health jobs can pay. And the big catalyst was one of my good friends that a coworker that I had really befriended, was very intelligent, very smart, and she interned at a particular agency that I worked at. She interned there, and then she worked there for a year, so she was there for a full year and a half. And then at a year and a half, she was like, "I'm done. I don't want to do therapy anymore." And I was like,
"Wow,
you have probably $100,000 of school debt, and after a year and a half, this agency and the way how poorly they run things, that's burnt you out." And that was not okay with me. That really pissed me off.
Yeah.
And so I went to my residency supervisor because I'm not licensed yet. I'm a resident, so kind of like a doctor does a residency. And I said, this is a really big problem. Somebody should do something about it. And she said, "Yeah, someone should." And I was like, "All right, let's start a podcast."
Be that guy.
Yeah. That's kind of been who I am. I unbeknownst to me, have always been an entrepreneur, and when there's something wrong, I usually come up with a solution and try to solve it. And the podcast has been my attempt at trying to support those incoming professionals. That's the podcast in a nutshell.
I love it, man. And what got you interested in mental health, I guess? Was there any sort of personal experience, or what was the go?
Yeah, so I always, growing up, I lifeguarded for 8 years, and when you're done with your rotations, you kind of just sit on your butt with people.
Yeah.
And my breaks were largely with some of the kids that were younger than me, and they opened up to me, and I, now I know I just have a therapeutic presence. I just have a presence that helps people feel safe and comfortable. And I had one of my graduate professors tell me that that if she was a client with me in the office, she would know that no matter what storm they brought in with them, that I would kind of be the rock in the storm, or the eye of the hurricane. And so I guess just from a young age, I had that. People joked about it growing up. And I majored in psychology in my undergraduate, and I had no idea what I wanted to do. I just knew I needed to go on to higher education because you can't do anything with just a psych bachelor's. And I had a really wonderful undergraduate professor sit me down and talk to me about what I wanted to do. And she was, after an hour-long conversation, she was like, "Oh, you want to be a counselor? You want to be a therapist?" And I was like, I was what, 21? I was like, okay, if you say so. And she wrote I've never read it, but apparently it was a glowing recommendation to the school that I ended up going to.
Mm.
And they said that that was 50% of why they accepted me to that program was her recommendation.
Mm.
And yeah, the rest is history. So so yeah, it's just something that I guess I was called to do.
And I think it's important, whether or not you actually enjoy it or not, and whether or not you make it your profession, that we all have those skills to actually be able to have these sorts of conversations beyond the superficial to anyone. I was just having a chat with Johann Hari, who wrote a book called Lost Connections, which is about the maybe the slightly leftist center leading causes of depression and anxiety and all that sort of stuff. And I guess the basic contention is we've become disconnected from who we are as a species, who we are as a social tribe, and the way to, I guess, meander through life with eating healthily and all these sorts of things. But I guess in a roundabout way, Gabe, do you have some sort of area within the mental health field that you enjoy most, a sort of patient or client you like to have a chat with the most?
Yeah, so I specialize in ADHD, or attention deficit hyperactivity disorder.
Yeah.
And I have ADHD as well. And I kind of I knew because I own the gym, I knew I needed to niche down my private practice at least. So when I opened my practice, I had just I've been listening to a very specific podcast on building a private practice business,
Nice.
and they were always talking about niche, and really reflect on some of depending on the clientele that you're dealing with, it can be draining or it can be energizing. And they said, what kind of population energizes you the most? And I was like, that's ADHDers, and I didn't know why. And looking back, it was because I had been consuming for my own education, had been consuming all of the books and podcasts on ADHD, and was like, oh, well, this is why I can, I started my gym, started a practice, started a podcast, all within either side of 16 months of marrying my wife.
Wow.
I'm like, the only reason I can do all that is because I have ADHD, and wow, wouldn't it be special if I could give these kids that I'm seeing a glimpse into. I know school sucks right now, but you actually have gifts that can make you wildly more successful than your parents or than anyone else that you can imagine right now.
Totally.
And so so I specialize in ADHD. My practice is called ADHD Counseling in the Roanoke Valley. That's where I live. And so I exclusively see kids and adults with ADHD.
Wow. Man, this is super fascinating This is super fascinating for me as someone who was actually recently diagnosed with the same thing.
Yeah,
but,
I know.
Yeah. Of course you know. But what I find fascinating about this thing is that for me it was something where it's like I had to learn how to make sure, as we all do, I had to figure out how to live my own life in the way that suited me. And what I really liked there, you said, people with ADHD and all these sorts of things, you hone in on almost these superpowers that you can really use to your potential. And
Yes.
we all have different sorts of things, strengths and weaknesses, but how do you sort of, when people come out of school and they find they can't concentrate and they come to your practice, how do you sort of get them started on this way to discovering how they can actually use this disorder, as it's kind of more commonly known, to their advantage?
Yeah, and let me say one thing before I answer that question. Dr. Ned Hollowell, he is kind of the guy on ADHD.
Nice.
So I would highly recommend. I'll send you some books that you should read. I don't have them off the top of my head.
Yeah.
But he's the guy, and I was actually lucky enough to see him give a keynote on entrepreneurial ADHD.
Wow.
And that was amazing. But he always says the only disorders are the stigmas that are placed on those diagnosed.
Yeah. Totally.
And I think that's just so powerful because, look, if you looked at me when I was in middle school or elementary school, I had a disorder. But you put me in a new environment, in an environment where I can control everything, like I did today and like I do every day. I'm able to run 2 businesses and a podcast,
Yeah.
I may not be able to, on command at, right after lunch, do all these algebra tests, but I can do other stuff. I can organize my life in the way that I know that's best. So yeah, to answer your question, I think especially when I get kids that, it's interesting. I'm noticing a trend since over my practice. I get a bunch of kids that are 8 years old, because that's a typical diagnosis. They're in second grade, and the demands of homework and studying and tests increases exponentially for them. So then all these ADHD symptoms kind of bubble to the surface. So I see all these kids around 8, and then I see not really a whole lot in between until it's either high school or their first year of college, when they're on their own and they can't really manage what's going on. And that, I think, those are two very pivotal points, I think, in an ADHDer's life, because primarily with the college students, if they've struggled through all of their academic career, they have a narrative of I'm dumb and I'm stupid and I can't. And the hardest thing to do, and what's most fun for me, is to help them have a paradigm shift in the way that they're thinking.
Yeah.
And the paradigm shift is around, these were standards. These tests that you're measuring yourself on are standards that are unmatched for your skill set, or what you're really good at. And one of the metaphors that I've been using lately is, that's why we have like weight classes in like boxing or MMA, is because if you weighed 155 pounds and you went to go fight someone that was 220,
yeah,
you're just gonna get clobbered.
Yeah.
And for a lot of the ADHDers, it's, you're gonna sit down all day, and then at the end of the day, we're gonna take a test. So you have all this pent up energy. And I don't know how things are in Australia, but here in Virginia, they've cut recess, they've cut gym. Gym is twice a week, and it's like you are going to expect these ADHDers to perform. That's insanity. So it needs to be a paradigm shift of, look, school. Now that you're out of school, I can tell you this: school was never set up for you to succeed as an ADHDer.
Yeah.
It never was. It's not. And now that we know that, we can kind of move past I'm dumb and I'm stupid to a view of, I was set up to fail, and now that I know this, now that I'm like seeing the matrix for what it is, now I have control of what I can and cannot do. And that's a really, really hard paradigm shift for a lot of kids, or I guess young adults that are 18, 19 years old, because their total value is placed on a GPA or an SAT score or ACT. I don't know what they have in Australia, but these standardized tests that say you can or cannot get into college. And when your whole value is wrapped up around that, it's hard to see your value for what it is, or anything outside of that. And there's I can't remember what his name is. The guy who owns JetBlue, the airline JetBlue. He was quoted as saying, he had called Dr. Hollowell, who I mentioned before, after he I guess made his first billion or whatever. And Dr. Hollowell was like, how do you feel? You're a billionaire. He had worked at Southwest and had got fired from Southwest because he was being too innovative, and the other board members were threatened. So they, talked shit about him, and the CEO fired him, and so he started JetBlue. You've kind of struggled, and now you're on the top. You're a billionaire. And his response was, I know I've made all this money and I'm successful, and I will never want for anything, but I still feel like that kid who's staring at the test and doesn't know the answers. And that kind of stuff is really where the counseling kicks in. Is we really need to peel this onion and undo years of school brainwashing almost, where they told you have an F, so you're dumb.
I totally agree, man. And I think something that when I was at school, they began to implement was the grade, as well as so we were graded based on just a standardized score, whatever you want to call it, and then we were also graded based on our intention and our ability to actually do as best we could. So You know, you'd often get kids getting like a D or a C or an E or whatever, but getting like a B and an A for trying and the effort they put in. And I think that's really prevalent with what we're talking about, especially with someone with ADHD out there, is that you know, just because it's very important that we all taste and, you know, we try to do as many different things we can in life to find what we actually want to do and what we actually can really give a lot of energy to, because obviously, as you know, someone with ADHD, unless you really love it, it's not going to go anywhere, you know. And with those sorts of scores, it's like, hey, you tried your absolute best, maybe it's not for you, and then maybe, you know, the schooling system can start to come into a place where it's like, okay, if this subject isn't really for you, how about we try this one, or we can try this one to, I guess, just find what makes us happy out there.
Yeah, and I think that's you know, I've been wrestling with this idea of this idea that I really believe. I have like three thoughts going at the same time. My first
Take
thought
your pills,
is
mate. Take your pills.
yeah. My first thought is, you know, to your point, I really stress, especially with my young kids, to really start thinking outside the box, and without explicitly telling them. I am telling them that they need to go the way of the entrepreneur, because if you've read the book Abundance, or you are familiar with that, I guess the terminology of abundance, or what it means, you know that you can start a business and you can create a life out of it. And the reason I say entrepreneurship is because it's completely what you want it to be.
Yeah.
I have organized my life around my businesses to how I perform best. So I'm up at 4:30 in the morning here. I do some yoga and breath work 3 days a week, and then I go coach for about an hour. Then I work out for an hour and a half. Then I coach for another hour. Then I come home, and then between 10 and 1 is my most productive time. And in those few hours, I can get what the average person get done in 6 hours. I can get it done in that window, because I know that after I've worked out, after I've been around a bunch of really good people, I'm up, I'm energized, I'm focused, and I can really get stuff done. And I think that's why, I mean, you do read about a lot of ADHDers that are entrepreneurs, but I think once the ADHD can figure out what my strengths are and how to exploit them and showcase them, then, you know, the sky's the limit. With my younger kids, I often use the metaphor of Superman, because they like superheroes, and superheroes are big right now.
Yeah.
And I tell them, you know, Superman, if he was on his homeworld of Krypton, he wouldn't have any superpowers. You know, no one on Krypton had superpowers because they were under a red sun. And under a red sun, Kryptonians are normal people like you or I. And that's why his parents sent them to Earth, because we have a yellow sun. And they knew the yellow sun would give him superpowers. So they sent him here to help us. And I say the same thing. It's the same thing with your ADHD. School is the red sun. And you need to find, in school and in life as you get older, you need to find rays, or you need to bathe in your yellow sun.
I love it.
For me, my yellow sun is, you know, we're doing this podcast, I'm standing. You can't see me, but I'm still standing because I can fidget. I'm actually standing on 1 foot right now. My yellow sun is also working out every day. So if we can find these things, then we can really showcase how brilliant we are. But if we, you know, force ourselves into the track that the school wants us to, well, of course we're going to fail.
Okay, so I want to get into the other side of ADHD, and that's, you know, there was a big rise, I believe, in the 2000s, and, you know, kids left, right, and center were getting diagnosed with ADHD and all this sort of stuff. And, you know, if I look back with, you know, through meditation or reflection, you know, I feel like a lot of the disorder components of that disorder may have been mitigated if I stopped eating Fruit Loops every morning, if I was, you know, not taking in as much sugar, and if I was actually got into a habit of meditating and you know, doing all these life skills. I guess, what do you think about the prevalence of the disorder, and how much of that is in response to the societal changes we've seen?
I think it's a really good question, and I don't think it's one that people are, in my humble opinion, are answering correctly. I think we have created, in the societal aspect of your question,
Sure.
I think we right now are really, really, really good at making ADHDers. We're
Yeah.
really good at it. I just read a study on, and it was like the title of the article was like no shit, but it was having your toddler or your infant, it was basically 5 or under, playing on a tablet is detrimental to their like overall health. And I was like, well, no shit.
Yeah,
Like, why would you give someone that can't walk, can't form words yet, can't complete sentences, or isn't even in school yet, a tablet for more than 5 minutes?
Yeah.
Or like a single 20-minute show. And it was like, I think the article kind of concluded like, or maybe we shouldn't be doing this. And it was like, of course not. And then of course, us as we get older with the cell phones and Instagram and this has been talked about ad nauseum, but it's the constant dopamine drip. We're really good at making ADHDers. And I think because of those things, we get misdiagnosed a lot with ADHD, or there are a lot of misdiagnoses because we're really good at making them. So it's hard because ADHD is a neurological disorder. There's a disorder in our brain that's affecting our neurochemicals, and which neurochemicals are being pumped out at what rate and how often. That is different than having someone looking for a stimulus from a phone alone. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
So if I think back to when I was in school when there were no phones, I was looking at the window, I was looking at the wall and looking at the paint and the way the paint and see if I couldn't make any shapes with the paint. Whereas now it's a singular focus of I wonder what's on my phone, and I'm not looking at the window, I'm not doing this, I'm not doing that. So I think that disrupts the prevalency and the misdiagnoses. But I also think there are just, in the United States, there's a shortage of child psychiatrists across the nation. And so there's like 2 in my area. And apparently one of them has had to go to private pay because he's like, I have a young daughter, and if I didn't charge this much, I'd never get to see her. And this is like my barrier to, working myself to death. But because of that lack of expertise, we have a lot of people that are just saying, oh, he can't sit still, he has ADHD, or don't really know the symptoms and all the intricacies of an ADHD or what goes into a true ADHD. And I look back at my education, quote unquote, my own education of reading all those books and listening to the podcasts and stuff like that. And after reading and doing all that stuff, after it was like a good year of consuming all of this stuff, I was like, whoa, we don't know anything about anything. Like we really, coming fresh out of graduate school, we know nothing. And that was the other thing that sparked my need to start the podcast, was to remind everyone, look, you don't know shit. Like you don't know anything, and we're working with some very sick people. And ADHD can be managed, sure, and sometimes it's causes issues, but it's not like someone with ADHD is equivalent to someone who's severely depressed and suicidal. That they're not on the same scale. So to me, that's very, very concerning that expertise isn't there, and then you have people just willy-nilly kind of giving this ADHD diagnosis.
I totally agree, man. I think, this is just speaking purely anecdotally, but the big thing that I guess led me to understand myself a little bit more was the prevalence of anxiety within the ADHD, and also the anxiety within the OCD, where it was like people would say, oh, I'm so OCD, I have to have my fork straight on my dinner table. It's like, oh, cool, man. Like, well, that's great, but does that give you like debilitating anxiety if it's not straight? It's like, okay, well, I really struggle to sit still. And it's like, oh, cool, I've got ADHD. Okay, well, if you don't do things that you want to do, like, does it give you debilitating anxiety? And I think that's where the breakdown in the communication or the understanding of these disorders, for me anyway, was that. Does that I guess resonate with you?
It's 100% true. I don't tell my younger clients, but I tell my older clients and my younger clients' parents that I do a lot of mindfulness with my ADHDers, just because it's a moment of pause that they can have, and especially if they have like racing thoughts, and not necessarily anxiety, but it's just Well, like as an example, not even 5 minutes ago, I was like, I have three thoughts going at the same time. If that happens, and they may be great thoughts, there were three great points that I wanted to make, and I only remembered one. But it could be something where it's like, okay, if I can just return to the breath, I can slow my thoughts down and really laser focus on one of them, or at least remember all three. But anyways, I tell my older clients and my younger clients' parents, at some point your child is going to be anxious or depressed. It's just going to happen. And it's one of the two. And I almost tell them that, and I almost make it like an absolute, and it's there's probably a 50% chance that they will have anxiety or depression, but it's pretty high. But I let them know that so that they can be prepared, and I can remind them, we're working on mindfulness, we're working on breath work, we're working on visualizations when that anxiety or depression comes up. And it may not be anytime soon. It may be, years from now after their first, heartbreak that happens.
Yeah.
And they fall into some anxiety or depression, but at least you'll know that it was coming. You will have maybe had it in the back of your head. That way when it does arise, you'll be able to catch it sooner, and you'll be able to look back and say, let's revisit the breath work. Let's revisit the mindfulness and the visualizations and the meditations to help you out. So I always tell my parents that it's just going to happen.
Totally. And I think it's those tools and those tactics are definitely not something to be just laissez-faire with, or just something just to, I guess, push aside and go, oh, they're just fucking woo-woo, or they're just too,
right.
They don't really work. I feel like a lot of people go, oh, meditation's not for me, or, focusing on the breath isn't for me, and all that sort of stuff. And I just want to, for anyone listening that I guess this sort of stuff does resonate with wholeheartedly, either directly or indirectly, please do stick with those, or at least try to find, some way that meditation can work for you. And meditation is that understanding of just getting to know yourself by spending time with yourself. And, the breath, as Gabe says just perfectly, is the fact that the breath is the only thing that we know that it happens unconsciously, but you can also consciously dictate it. And there are times when we get highly anxious that the breath starts to pant and pant and pant very, very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
We can have not only an unconscious understanding that that's happening without our direct inhibition or influence, but also resonate with the fact that we can control that and bring that down. That has a really, really strong effect as to the perpetuation of the spiraling thoughts, the physical feelings and associations you get with these sorts of disorders. So I really want to highlight and stress how good those tools are. And they've been around for thousands of years. I mean, they're just great.
Yeah. Have you read any of Sharon Salzberg's work?
Oh, I know the name. I definitely know Sharon Salzberg. What's one of her books? I don't think so.
She wrote Love and Kindness, and I have a book here. Let's see if I can reach it with my headset on.
One leg.
Real Happiness.
Right.
Yeah. And it was she turned me on to mindfulness. But it took me a really long time to get into any kind of breath work. And I found, and this is helpful for your listeners too, if you're like, mindfulness is not for me, breath work's not for me.
Yeah.
It took me a really long time to catch on and actually do it, and it wasn't until I stumbled upon Mark Devine, who does Seal Fit, and he was like, let's just do this breath work, and it was like on YouTube or whatever, and I watched it, and I was like, yeah, I was doing it as part of one of his free 30-day challenges, and I remember this was probably before I started my business, so I was really stressed out about money.
Yeah. And
so I remember a normal incident where I would have, snapped at my then girlfriend and now wife, and I just didn't. And I was like, whoa, that's weird. And it really caused me to look inward and say, all right, I need to do more breath work. And then I had the opportunity to see Sharon Salzberg speak here in Roanoke, where I live, and she kind of solidified it for me and said, mindfulness can be anything as long as there's intent, as long as the intent is to be mindful and focused on one thing. And of course, if you have an intruding thought, that's not a bad thing. That's a good thing, because it gives us an opportunity to kind of return back to the practice. And if we don't have that practice, or if we don't have the opportunity to return back to the practice, we can't really get any better at mindfulness. So I know a lot of people are like, well, I can't, concentrate for more than 1 second. And it's like, that's the point. That would be like, I don't think you're a runner. I'm not a runner, but us deciding to go run a marathon tomorrow morning.
Yeah.
It's like, no, we have to put in the very first mile, and then maybe a couple days later, put in another mile, and then maybe, and months later, we're building up to this. That really, really, really helped. But what also has helped me, also not kind of beat myself up about like, I really want to do this mindfulness stuff, but this isn't working, is I have her book, Real Happiness, and it's a 30 days to like more mindfulness or whatever. And for the first 2 weeks, you're supposed to do a 10-minute, I don't even know what it's called. You're just supposed to sit for 10 minutes a day, three times a week for the first 2 weeks, and then you can move on to the next 2 weeks. And that is really, really, really hard for me. I have to, and I think it's because of my ADHD, I have to have a prompt. So I have her audiobook, so she kind of talks to the prompt, and that helps me just enough to kind of stay focused and not drift, because I could drift, and I could drift for the entire 10 minutes. But I found that breath work is really helpful, and I have found that working out and lifts are very, very helpful. And I have yet to write any articles or anything like that, but I really do want to write articles and give some talks on mindfulness within lifting and working out, because it is mindful. I think you do some Olympic weightlifting, right?
Yeah, man. Yep, CrossFit coach for sure.
Yeah. So I powerlift, but I have a lot of Olympic weightlifting friends, and a lot of them, as a counselor, it affords me some skills that like some advanced coaches have.
Yes.
But I've watched elite lifters, and I can see them, getting ready to go for a jerk, and I know, they're not going to make that jerk.
Yeah.
And they don't make it, and I've already turned away, and I started talking to someone else, and I've had people ask me like, what's going on? Why are you like rude or whatever? And I'm like, I can just tell that they're not going to make that lift, so I disengage. And they're like, well, how can you tell that? And I'm like, I'm reading their nonverbals, even though their nonverbals are, I'm in the jerk, I'm taking a deep breath, and then I'm moving. It's like, no, beyond that, I can just see the gears are turning in their head.
Totally.
And if those gears are turning, they're not going to make the lift, because they're not present, they're not in the moment, they're thinking about this, and this. And when you can kind of still your mind, those lifts become effortless. It's something that has really, not only has it helped me in my powerlifting, but it has transferred it over to other things. So if I'm going for, especially if I'm going for a 1 rep max, there's a video of me of squatting like 300 for the second time. It was a really scary number for me for a really long time. And I'm just kind of sitting with my breath, and my little brother was visiting, and he's recording me, and I have my eyes closed, and I just take a deep breath. And I remember taking a deep breath, and I don't remember anything after that. But we had this video of me walking up to the bar, unracking the bar, taking a deep breath, and then unracking it, squatting, coming back up and racking it. And then that's kind of when my memory kicked back on. And that to me is very, very intense mindfulness. And it's only for a few seconds, but it's enough for me to kind of reap some benefits, especially with my ADHD brain.
Totally, man. And look, I think back to your point about meditation as well, a lot of people that I speak to are very, very discouraged about the thought, because, they already have this preconceived understanding that they can't focus and they can't do this and that. And then we say, yes, but that's why you probably do need meditation and all that sort of stuff. And that's all very well and good. But I really feel that there's so much pressure placed on a virgin meditator, if you will, to focus on the breath and do all this sort of thing. And I wrote this a little bit in that mindfulness meditation is focusing on the breath, and when your mind moves away, focus back on it. But if this is you out there, I feel like a really great way just to get a little bit better at it is, like you said before, just sit down for 5 minutes, and it's as hard as it possibly is, just kind of watch where your thoughts take you. And it's totally cool if you get lost in a thought, all that sort of stuff, whatever happens, but 5 minutes of just sitting by yourself every day, even if it's not every day, even if it's like 3 times a week, you're slowly but surely going to get to understand yourself a little bit better. And moreover, over time, you'll start to understand and have a see how your thoughts manifest, and you'll be able to observe that. And I think that's super powerful, you know. And that doesn't. And we're not saying focus on this or focus on this or do this or do this. Just be with who you are.
Yeah, I think people are also, especially for, like you said, the Virgin Meditator, that they're looking for what do I need to do?
Yeah.
And they can come to you and you're saying sit, but I'm saying I do box breathing. I breathe in for, inhale for a 4 count, hold for a 4 count, exhale for a 4 count, hold for a 4 count.
Yeah.
And that I have found works better than anything that I have found for me so far. So doing different ratios of breath counting.
Totally.
That may not be your thing, and it kind of goes back to our ADHDers is find what works for you. If you find that breath work works for you, or you hate it, my wife does not like it, and that's fine. But what are you gonna do? What are you gonna do instead? Are you gonna go for a walk without your phone on a nice day? One of the best mindfulness exercises that I have done for some of my clients is in the fall.
Yeah.
We go on a hike, and I kind of blaze the trail, and we went out to the stump, and we sat on the stump, and I just said, close your eyes, and I want you to just listen to whatever sounds you hear, and I want you to try to find, with your eyes closed, try to find a leaf fall, and when you hear it snap, kind of quote unquote follow it until it hits the floor.
Yes.
And I know, but they don't know that there's a stream nearby, and you can hear it kind of babbling. And within a minute, they're like, "There's a stream," and it's like, "Yeah, dude, yeah." Even though we're out in the forest, your mind is still so loud that you can't hear that there's a stream that like we could see, but you're not, you're not open enough to see it or hear it.
Totally.
But if we close everything off within a minute, everything kind of becomes clearer. But find what works for you. That may not work, for some of my ADHD clients. When I do that, it doesn't work. They're like, look at this bug. They open their eyes like, hey, there's a bug. Hey, there's this. Hey, there's that. But even in that instance, I'm like, okay, you want to look at that bug? Follow that bug.
Yep.
Even if it means standing up and following it, get on all fours and just follow that bug, because it's the intent behind it. If you're singularly focused, then it counts.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. Hey, Gabe, I wanted to move this next part into some more personal questions, mate. And
sure.
I guess with someone diagnosed with ADHD, there would be that negative aspect, as much as we like to focus on the good sides to it. But what was the lowest point in your life, mate? And elaborate.
Yeah, the lowest point in my life, I think, I don't know, I think they've all been, I'm thinking of a few.
Sure.
And I'm thinking of one that I always tell my parents and my clients is, I distinctly remember being in middle school and trying to maybe not middle school, maybe it was elementary school. I don't know when I learned things.
Yeah.
But I was trying to learn the multiplication tables, and I had flashcards. And I remember flipping through these flashcards and getting them wrong and wrong and wrong, and just hating myself at a young age. I mean, I couldn't have been more than 12 years old. And just a visceral hate for myself. And I'm flipping through them, and finally I don't even realize it, but I can't see the cards anymore because I'm just sobbing. I'm just crying.
Yeah.
And I just had to put them down because I was like, well, now I can't even fail because I failed again. And I remember a lot of struggles like that growing up in school. But I think that one's probably most apropos. There were some breakups along the way, but I think that one's that one stands out, and that one has served me best, especially with my clients.
Absolutely, yeah. Man, I appreciate it for sharing. That's great, dude. I love it. And finally, what does spirituality mean to you? Are you a spiritual person? Do you practice some sort of spirituality? What does it mean to you?
It's funny. I have a pastor that works out with me at the gym. He's one of my members, and we always have these theological discussions, and it's really it's really made me think about spirituality, not religion, but spirituality, and I think, um, I want to live abundantly, in every sense of the word, as I want to be able to, um, as I know that there's not just one pie, there's an infinite number of pies that we can all pull from,
Mate,
and we can all give
Get me a
give
pie.
to. Yeah. And I think spiritually, that's just that's how I operate. Even as a business owner, is the more that I work on myself and the more that I work on my business, yes, that brings in more income, but that means, that affords me opportunities to travel. I've been asked to go down to different states to give talks on ADHD where there are no experts. And I wouldn't be able to do that if I was still working in community mental health and didn't have any money and was worried about and was operating from a scarcity mentality of there's only these many clients and I have to keep them to myself and I have to get all the hours just for myself and I'm not going to share them. So I think from a spiritual perspective, I try to give as much as I can, because I know that I have enough, and I think that's something that's really new for me. It's kind of scaring my wife. We found out that she's pregnant.
Wow! Congratulations,
and
man. That's awesome.
Thank you. Yeah, and she's freaking out, and I'm freaking out, and I had to pause, and I was like, we have food on the table, we have a nice home, we have 2 dogs that are fine, that are healthy. We have this one for this. I have 2 businesses. We have enough, and we have everything that we need. And because we have everything that we need, we can really kind of give to everyone that may not have enough or that may need something more. So I don't know if that answers your question. I don't really know. I don't really know what spirituality is, I guess. Unfortunately, I just know I have something. As pretentious as it sounds, there's a great quote from the very first Superman movie, even the latest one, where Superman is seeing his father from Krypton talking to him in his Fortress of Solitude, and he says, they're great people, Kal-El, they wish to be. They only lack the light to show the way. For this reason, above all, I sent them you. And I always think about that because it's like, this is why I'm here. I'm here to help my tribe of ADHDers and anyone else to get to their perfect self or their ideal self or to self-actualize. And yes, they're going to stumble, and yes, they're going to fall, but eventually they will join me in this abundant mentality or this place of having enough.
I love it, man. You know what? And the reason why that question is set so ambiguously is because I like to see where it takes people. It's like, what does spirituality mean? It's like, oh, well, what the fuck are you asking? But it's like, where does that take you? And I love the fact that it's taken you, like, whether you have an understanding of spirituality for yourself or not, who cares? But like, it's taken you to this understanding of abundance and gratitude, and that's what it is, man. I feel like all the great prophets of the time, and who knows, but maybe in 500 years, people will be worshipping the church of Tony Robbins or the church of whatever. Right. But there's always this understanding of leave this world in a better place that you found it, and always give back and do unto others and all that sort of stuff. So it really characterizes your character, which is great, man. I really love it, and I appreciate you for sharing.
Absolutely.
Hey, finally, Gabe, where can people find you, man? And anything you want to plug, give us the name of your podcast.
Sure. My podcast is called Informed Consent. I came up with that name because a lot of people didn't know what they were getting into.
I love it.
And if you've ever been to therapy, you know that you have to sign the informed consent, so you know what you're getting into. So if you're in community mental health, or you're an incoming community mental health professional, even if you're in graduate school and doing like your internship or practicum or whatever, that is a really good resource for you. And if you are interested in anything that I'm doing ADHD wise, my website is roanokeadhd.com, and Roanoke is the city that I live in. So yeah, You can find me there or email me at gabriel@roanokeadhd.com. I'd be happy to have conversations with any of your listeners.
Beautiful, man. How do you spell Roanoke, just quickly?
Let me write it down because I'm a terrible speller. Roanoke.
Beautiful. Love it, dude. Hey, thanks so much for coming on the show, man.
Absolutely. I appreciate you having me.
Sweet, dude. And that's a wrap.